Okay, this video is about desktop printing calculators and the things that they have in common. I want to stress that this is just about what they have in common. All of these machines have additional features. I'll do a later, like a buyer's guide video or something like that. But I wanted to talk about the buyer's guide to talk about how they differ. In this video, I wanted to talk about things that they all have in common. I'll do individual reviews of these at some point later on, but I didn't want to go over all the common things in those reviews. I'll mention a few differences here, but mostly I just want to talk about what they have in common. I'm going to move around between the machines. You just saw me do that rather than show a single one. That way you'll get a taste for what each of the different models is. We're talking about 5 models here. This is the Sharp EL1801v, Canon MP11DX, the Casio HR-200RC, the Monroe UltimateX, and the Victor PL8000. This covers most of the popular manufacturers. The Casio, Sharp, Monroe, and Victor are current models. You can buy them new. The Canon has been replaced by the MP11DX2. Looking at the keyboard, they appear to basically be the same thing. A disclaimer, I don't work for any of these manufacturers. None of them have paid me. I don't use these regularly. I'm actually an engineer. I've been interested in scientific and graphing calculators for a long time. And I picked up one of these Monroes, got interested in it, and then next thing you know, I had lots of these things. So what are they, and who uses these things anyway? Well, they are desktop printing adding machine calculators. Desktop, they sit on a desk. They're a lot bigger than your typical scientific or graphing calculator like you might have had in school. They all have a printer. Note that the printer can be turned off. You can disable it at any time. These are all adding machine calculators. That means that plus and minus work differently from the way a calculator in school will work. That's important. I will show how that works. More on that later. Who uses these? Typically like accountants, tax professionals, small business owners, business managers at medium-sized businesses. Basically anyone who needs to quickly and accurately add up lots of numbers. That's the main feature of all of these. The rest of the stuff is kind of icing on the cake. Why? Why on earth would you use one of these things? Well, there's a couple reasons. First of all, there's the printer itself. With the printer, you can keep a record, a permanent record of what you've done. That can help, again, like if you're doing taxes or a business, you might want to have that permanent record. The printout lets you review what you've done for accuracy. We're talking real money here, so it's important that you get it right. The other real reason is speed. These things have real keys. You can work on these very quickly. There's a little raise there on the 5 key on pretty much all of these, I believe. The idea is that you could use it without having to look at it. Fast, fast, fast. Big keys, real keys. Look at the size of that giant plus key. There are fewer keys per calculation. You'll see that a lot of these are sort of custom keys. An interesting thing is if you look at these and think about your school calculator, there's no shift key on any of these. The shift key is one more key to press. With these machines, it's all about the fewest things you possibly have to do. Let's talk about some basic features here. I'll turn these on as we go across. They all have a nice big display, which is kind of great. All of them except the Casio are illuminated displays. The Casio is liquid crystal. I believe they all make liquid crystal models. And let's see, most of these are 12-digit calculators except this guy, the Victor. The Victor is 14 digits. And that display is quite dim. Wow, you can't even really see it. I'll have to do something about that. They all have regular keyboard down here, plus a bunch of switches across the top, there, there, there. The switches sort of set different modes. I'll talk about what the modes are that they use. All of these let you work with the printer on or off. Do this. This one currently has the printer off. Come over here, switch that switch over to print. And now when we do things, the printer will print. You can see the printout there. They all have a switch for the number of digits that they will display. I would set these all to the 2 value for now, and I will explain why at a later time. So that's at 2. That's at 2. That's at 2. Okay. All right, let's talk about some of the differences between these and your handheld calculator that you had from school. There are really 3. One is the adding machine functionality. The second one is what I'll call price mode, and the third is rounding. Okay, so adding machine addition. It works more like a cash register than your typical calculator. On your calculator in school, you would type, to add 56 and 22, you'd type 56 plus 22 equals, and you don't get the right answer on this one because you're doing it wrong. It works like a cash register. If you want to add, in that sense, there's a running total. So you're going to do 56, add it to the total. Whoops, hey, let's clear that out. We're going to do 56 and add it to the total. 56, there goes that. Add 23 to the running total, it's 79. Subtraction works the same. If we want to subtract 12, we'll subtract that, and we get 67. Let me come over here. I'm going to do that same one. Let's clear that out. I got the printer on this one. 56, add 23, add, what was it, 12, subtract, and I got 77. So what you do is you put in the number and then the operation, either add or subtract. To recall that, that number, that subtotal, you press the diamond key. And to recall it and clear it, you press the star key. So now if I press the star key again, of course, it'll be 0. There's nothing left. Most of these, as you're entering the numbers and adding them up, they'll show the running subtotal in the display. The Monroe is a little bit different. It has the ability to just show the number. I don't have it configured that way, but there is a way to set that. Actually, I think it might be that. Yeah. So here, if I press 77 add, it still shows 77. In a lot of ways, I think that's a better thing to do because you need to know if you've entered the wrong number or not, and it just continues to show the number there. So to see what the total is now, we'll press that star key, and we've got 386.50. Press the diamond, press the diamond key to show it. Press the star key. It recalls it and clears it. Press that again. The value is 0. Okay, the second big difference that they have is what I'll call price mode. What that means, let's come over here. I'll put this on most of them. It's labeled on this guy that shows the number of decimal points as A. We use that one a lot. Let's come over here. We'll do this one. This one uses a plus sign. And what that means is that if you want to enter numbers and cents, you don't have to enter a decimal point. So for example, let's clear the accumulator, and then I'm going to add $1.23 and $4.56. Instead of doing 1.23, I just have to do 123. Add, and you'll see here it's 1.23. 456, whoops, 456, add, and that total is 579. This gets back again to speed, speed, speed. This saves you one key. It saves you not having to press that dot key. And of course, if you need to add a whole number like 6, you could just add 6 dot, and add it, or you could do 6 and press the 00 key. Whoops, double press that. Try it again, 6, 00. Adds 6 to it. You can see on the printout there, it added 6.00. The third thing is rounding. On your school computer calculator, when you do your calculations, if you do 12, we'll add that, and 55, and add that, and 6 point yada, 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 and add that. Internally, it keeps as many digits as it can, and then if you're doing rounding, it displays a different number, right? It displays the number rounded off. On these machines, when it does the rounding, it rounds the number off. So, for example, if we come over to the Monroe and we enter 12, we'll add that, and then 45, and then 2.3333, add, and then if we recall that, there's 59.33. If we multiply this times 1,000, it's 59,330. So that number that it showed really was rounded off. To put it another way, or try to state it again, your school calculator always stores the numbers to the maximum number of digits that the calculator can handle. And the rounding is just occurring in the displayed value. So it displays a value that's rounded, but stored internally, it always has as many digits as it can. With these things, when you round, the number is actually rounded. It stores the rounded value. Again, the reason for that is you're talking real money here. So if you enter something that is supposed to represent dollars and cents, that's what it's going to give you. Okay, on all of these machines, you enter numbers basically the same way, 123. A couple differences are the 00 key, which adds 2 zeros. You can correct an individual number, delete an individual number from the display, from the entry with that back arrow key. And the clear key, let's see, here we go. Clear will clear out the number that you've entered and let you enter something different. Finally, there is a plus-minus key to let you change the sign. An interesting thing here on the Victor is that when you change the sign, it changes the backlighting from regular green to red. Okay, another big difference, of course, is the printer. Let's turn on the printer. And let's do a demo again. We'll add 1, 2, and 7, and then subtract 3. So let's clear that out. 1, add 2, add 7, add 3, subtract, pull the total. Let me just advance that. Here you can see it did 1 add, 2 add, 7 add, 3 subtract, and the 7 is the total of all those numbers. All right, I've got the printer on the Monroe, and let's try that over here. Clear that. We will do 1 add, 2 add, 7 add, 3 subtract, get the result. And there's the Monroe. It shows something a little bit different, right? Instead of just a 1 with a plus, this does a 1 with the C plus. The C means that the accumulator was cleared beforehand. Then it adds the 2, add the 7, subtract the 3. Notice the subtraction is in red. On pretty much all of these, subtractions and negative numbers get highlighted either in red or in bold. And then finally the result, 7. On the Monroe, it advances the paper when you hit the star key to show the accumulator. Let's turn on the Casio. It's got a print button there. It has a little print indicator. On the Casio, you actually have a clear all key. Let's try that. All right, try it again. 1, add, 2, add, 7, add, 3, subtract, give it a total. Okay, there's the printout from the Casio. Looks about the same, but they're all sort of a little different in terms of the symbols that they're going to print. and there's a frustrating lack of detail in them. These are all using 2 1/4 inch paper rolls. They will take rolls up to 150 feet. If you look sideways, that's a pretty fat roll it's got there. This one, that's the roll that it came with. It's a teeny tiny starter roll. Most of them are ink on regular paper. The Victor is different. That's a thermal printer. And most of them are black and red, 2-color printers. On the Victor, it uses regular and bold. The red is for negative numbers and subtraction. So for example, over here, clear that out, we'll do 45, add 56, add 78, subtract. Let's subtract a big number, subtract, and then we'll pull out the total, and you'll see the total is also in red. I'm going to highlight some differences in the printers because I think they're important. So really all of these are, almost all of them, are using ink on regular paper. The big difference is the Victor. Like I said, it's a thermal printer. That has several effects. This calculator is quite a bit less expensive than sort of the equivalent, which is the Monroe. It's because of the printer. The thermal printer is just a whole lot cheaper than an ink on paper printer. The paper is more expensive because it's thermal, but there's no cost for ink, so you'd have to weigh that out. There is less dust. The thermal paper is kind of shiny. It's not really dusty. Dust is what wrecks the printers. They get sensitive to it, so presumably this would last longer. This has the ability to print text, which is pretty cool. That means you can see sort of more and interesting stuff on this. You can see it has TL for total instead of an ST for subtotal instead of star and diamond. Just makes it a little easier to see what you're looking at. On the downside, it's a thermal printer. Images will fade, or they'll turn black if you heat this thing up. We got pizza the other day, and they threw the receipt in the pizza box. By the time we got back, completely black. So I think if you are looking for, if it's important to have a permanent record on the printout, I think the thermal printer is a bad idea. Finally, it is 1 color instead of 2, right? I'll come over to the Monroe, and you see that it has the red there. Over here, instead of using red, it uses the bold print. Another big difference is the speed. If we just sort of start entering numbers here, they go pretty quick. Come over to the Casio, for example, and it takes it a long time to print. That's the technology of the printers. I will talk about that, I think, in future video. So the speed is quite different. These things, it says about 2 lines per second. On the Monroe, I believe it's 5 lines. I think the Casio is also a line type printer. Let me turn the printer on. Yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty quick. And this Sharp is quite a bit slower. This is using a regular printer. Yeah, sort of going one at a time. The quality of the printout varies quite a bit. You feed that out. There is the Sharp. It's pretty sharp. Here is the Canon. Looks pretty good. The ink, I'm not using a very new ink roller on that, so that's faded a little bit. The Casio also, very nice and sharp. The Monroe is maybe not quite so nice. And the Victor, beautiful. Finally, there's longevity for the printer. If we come over to the Casio, there isn't a whole lot of data. They don't talk about it too much. But the Casio, they say this is rated for about 200,000 lines. That works out to about 18 rolls of 150-foot paper. So 18 rolls, that's not a whole lot. You come over to the Monroe. This thing is rated for about 5 million lines, which works out to 430 rolls of paper. So you would go through 20 of these calculators if it lasted the amount of time that the printer is rated before you wore through one of the Monroes. So it's important, I think, to check how what the rating is on the printer. If you want to figure out how that is, they typically rate them in lines. Well, what is a line and how many lines do you print? Who knows? Take the number of lines. So like this one is 5 million lines. Let's clear that out. 5 million lines. Divide that by 72. And that will give you the total number of feet that the printer is rated for. Now let's divide that by the typical length of paper for a roll that we use. For this one, if we're going to use 150 feet. Whoops, did I clear that out? I did. Let's try that again. 5 million divided by 72 is 69,000 feet. Let's divide that by 150, and we get 460. So maybe it's 460 rolls. But anyway, that's the calculation. Take the printer rating, divide by 72, you'll get the number of feet that it's rated for. Take the number of feet, divide that by the typical size of the roll that you used, usually 130 or 150 feet. That's the number of rolls that you'll go through. All right, back to what's in common. I promised myself I would really try to stick with this. So we mentioned that addition and subtraction work like a cash register or an adding machine. 55, add, do that, add, it does the total. Multiplication and divide work the way your school calculator would. So to multiply 2 times 3, you simply do 2 times 3 equals, and the result is 6. Division works the same. Clear that out for no real good reason. Let's do 10 divided by 5. You do 10 divided by 5 equals. And no surprise, the answer is 2. All of these calculators have what's called constant multiplication and constant division. So let's see how that works. Suppose you want to multiply a bunch of numbers by 2. So we'll do 2 times 3 equals, and we get 6. It remembers the first factor, 2. And suppose we want to multiply 2 times 8 now. You can just type 8 equals. It remembers that you were doing 2 before. 6 times 2 is that, and 23 times 2 is 46. Division is kind of the same way, but it's a little bit backwards because it's the divisor that gets remembered. So for example, if we're going to divide a bunch of numbers by 3, we can enter 45 divided by 3 equals, and now it remembers the 3, not the 45. So if we then do 20 and press equals, we get 20 divided by 3. 21 is 21 divided by 3. 6 is 6 divided by 3. Another feature that all of them have is, we mentioned the accumulator. They also have an independent memory. This one is labeled by M. M plus and M minus are equivalent to the plus and minus, but they go into an independent memory instead of the accumulator. And then it uses S for the subtotal and T for the total. The keys are a little different on the Monroe. It uses I for independent memory, plus minus. It uses the familiar diamond and star to recall and recall with erase. So for example, we will clear that one out. We'll add 23 to the independent memory and add 55 to it, and then recall and clear it. The result is 78. Another feature all of these have is grand total. This is usually enabled by a switch that says GT on it. What the grand total does is it keeps a total even after you have pressed the star key to recall and clear the accumulator. So for instance, we have cleared accumulator. We'll add 2 and 3. Recall that, we get 5. Okay, the accumulator is now clear. Right? Right. Now we're going to add 4 and 5. And recall and clear the accumulator again, we get 9. Then the grand total is the total of all those. It's the, 5 and 9, so that should be 14. There's our grand total, it is 14. Press it again, clear it. Another common feature is what we'll call item count. This is usually also controlled by a switch. Here we are on the Sharp, and on this one, you move that switch all the way over to IC. On some of them, it's N for counting up the number of items. With item count, it remembers how many items you've entered. So we'll do 2 add, 6 add, 5 add, 9 add. Recall it. And now, if we do the feed, you'll see there are the numbers 2, 6, 5, and 9 that we added. And here is the item count 4. So there were 4 total items that we had, totaling 22. If we then do some subtractions, the item count is -2. So on the Sharp, when you subtract, it subtracts 1 from the item count. When you add, it adds 1 to the item count. It's different on others. Some of them will always add 1 to the item count. I think that actually makes more sense. The other thing about the item count is that number basically tags along with the value in the accumulator in the sense that you show it with the star key. With the diamond key. If you press the star key, it will erase it just like it erases the accumulator. So it basically tags along with it. The devil's in the details with item count. Every one of these pretty much has slightly different functions. As I mentioned, some of them will, when you do subtraction, some will add 1 to the item count, some will subtract 1. Some of them let you set the item count directly. Others will not. On some of them, it always counts the items. On others, it will only count items if the switch is set to the item count. So read the manual, devil's in the details. Okay, another very common feature for a very common function is computing percents. So for example, let's compute 5% of 50. I'll clear this, and we will do 50 times 5, and here is the percent key. And the result is 2.5. You can add that, the 2.5, the 5% to the 50 now by simply pressing plus. And the strange thing is that value, I believe, is not added to the accumulator. Let's try that. Let's do this. 50 times 5% plus gives us 52. And now let's see what's in the accumulator. The accumulator is still 0. It's a little odd, but there you have it. They all work that way. You can subtract. Same sort of thing. We'll come over to this one. Let's clear it out. 50 times 5%. Subtract. We get 47.5, and our accumulator is still empty. You can also use the percent key to figure out a fraction expressed as a percent. Let's come over here. So for example, let's do 123 divided by 1368 as a percent. So 123 divided by 1368. And then we'll press percent instead of equals. And that is 8.99. So 123 is 8.99% of 1,368. You can subtract a percent also. So for instance, if we have something on sale for $16 and it's 20% off, you would do 16 times 20%, subtract, And there's your answer, 1280, and it shows up on the printer. They also can all do tax, like adding sales tax and subtracting from it. All of them set the tax rate differently, which is a little odd. The Monroe is the easiest, so let's set up a 5% tax rate. Just press 5 and the tax key. Now we got a 5% tax rate. Suppose you're selling something for $50 and there's a 5% tax. You just do 50 times tax, and there it is. The total price is $52.50. You can also, given the total sales price, you can figure out what the original price was without tax simply by doing divided by tax on this one. So we'll clear that out. We'll do 52.50 divided by tax, and that gives us the original $50. On some of them, like this guy, instead of the times tax and divide tax, there's just a tax plus and a tax minus key. If you want to see what the tax rate is, that's actually kind of hard on these. Most of them, well, some of them will let you do it, some of them won't. But the easiest thing to do is just set it to print mode and do a tax calculation. We'll add tax to 100 and then do the feed here. And if you zoom in, you can see the tax rate was 5%. They all do cost, sell, and margin calculations. This is for the case where you are selling something for a particular price. You bought it for a cost. The margin is the profit expressed as a percentage of the selling price. Not the cost, but the selling price. So let's do an example here. Suppose you buy something for $200. You sell it for $300. This will tell us that the profit is 33.34%. as expressed as a percentage of the margin. And if we advance the page, you can see the details there. 200 was the cost, 300 was the selling price, 33.34 is the percent. Once you've started some of these, you can then change some of the stuff, like if you want that to be 35% for the margin, you can ask, well, what's the selling price? And it's going to say $195. Okay, only a real calculator nerd like me would be interested in these kinds of things, but the clear and clear error key, not only does it clear the entry, but it also clears a pending multiplication. So for example, if you do 20 times, and then we'll clear that. And now if you press equals, right, there's nothing going on there. If you press 20 times 5, clear that, 4. Oh, the 4 key doesn't work so well. Equals that. Well, that just cleared the number, the entry that I put in. But the clear error, if you're interested, will clear a pending multiplication. It will also clear the constant multiplication. Recall that's where you do like 5 times 4 equals. And now if I do 8 equals, it will do 8 times 5, the first one that I put in. If I hit the clear key and do 8 equals again, nothing happens. So it's cleared that that pending multiplication, constant multiplication. The calculators all have the ability to label a calculation on the printed tape. This is usually, well, it's always with a key with a pound sign on it. So for example here, if you have invoice number 123456, and we press the pound key, and then feed that paper, you'll see that it printed 123456 and some stuff left justified. Some of them will print that in red. An interesting thing there is that you can also do enter several dots and it will print all of them. So if you're doing something on Christmas, 12.25.2004, even if it's 2024, hey, we can use that little back arrow, 2024. Notice the number in the display is 12.252024. But when we press the pound, what we'll get here is 12.25.2024. So it remembers the dots that we've put in there, even though on the number that's displayed on the display is something different. All of these calculators will let you set and maintain the date and time. Those are backed up by the battery. We'll talk about the battery backup in a little bit. And then generally you can display or print it by just pressing a date time key. I'll do that one again here. And you can see here it displays 12.15.2024 at 11:51. Checking my watch. Hey, that's right on. If I advance the paper, it prints it out on this one with spaces in between them all. So you can basically label a calculation with when you did it. Now, speaking of the battery backup, these all use a coin cell. Yeah, I'll go over here. Whoops, just hit one of the other ones there. Sorry about that. If I flip this guy over, there's a coin cell compartment on the back. They all have that. They all have a battery backup. What actually gets backed up varies, but in particular, they store the tax rate, the date and time. All of them store those two. Beyond that, some of them store a few things, some of them store everything. Note that the manual may be incorrect about which type of battery to use. Some of them say you need a 2025 coin cell, some say a 2032. Sometimes it says a 2025, but if you look at the calculator itself on the back, it says to use a 2032. So I would use what's printed on the back, or if a 2032 will fit, then go ahead and use that. The difference between those two, if you don't know, the numbers are the dimensions. So a 2032 is 20 millimeters wide and 3.2 millimeters tall. A 2025 is 20 millimeters wide and 2.5 millimeters tall. They're both 3 volts. So if a 2032 will fit, pop it in there, you'll get longer usage out of it. They all have various display indicators. Let me clear this, and let's give a little example. Let's do 78 divided by 0 equals, and you get a little error indicator there. They'll all do divide by 0. Most of them will also do an overflow, so if we do 1 and a whole bunch of zeros times a whole bunch of 8s equals, oh, that one says 8.88888 times 10 to the 17th. The Monroe is actually fairly unique in being able to handle very large numbers like that. Most of them, let's go over to this guy, can't handle that sort of thing. Let's do that again. 1, a bunch of zeros times a whole bunch of 8s equals, there's an error indicator there. So this did have an error. Yeah, and you've got the little underbars there. Yeah, so this can't handle a number that big. There's a lot of variability in the display indicators. They'll all do an error indicator. They'll all indicate whether the constant memory is in use. So, for example, I'll just keep on moving over because that's been a lot of fun. Let's do 25. Oh, we got 825. We'll add it to the memory, the independent memory with the button there. And notice you've got a little memory indicator coming on there. Recall the memory, there it is. Recall and clear the memory, and now the memory indicator goes off. So they all have a memory indicator, an error indicator. Beyond that, it varies quite a lot. Speaking of errors, they all let you know if you have tried to divide by 0, or if you have overflowed the calculating capacity of the calculator, right? They each have a limit for how big or how small a number they can handle. There's very little information on how big or how small those numbers actually are. Monroe's pretty good about it. They say 12 digits, but they will also go up to 24 when doing the calculations. And as we showed over here, it showed this in scientific notation. That is 8.88888 times 10 to the 17th. So 17 zeros, or basically where the decimal point is now, where it's 8 point, yada, yada, yada. The real number has the decimal point moved over to the right 17 places. It's a big number. The calculators all have various mode switches, I'll call them. We've talked a little bit about this one. This sets the number of digits after the decimal point. In this case, it is 0, 1, 2, 3, or 6. So if I move that over and press add, notice I've set it to 3, and it's showing 3 decimals. F means floating point, which means it will show as many as are necessary to capture the number. If I do 1 divided by 3 equals, that's 1/3, it's 0.333 repeating, and that's what it's showing here. The A on this one, as I mentioned earlier, is the automatic mode. That's where it automatically assumes the number you've entered is pennies instead of dollars, right? That the decimal point is actually 2 over from what you've entered. So if I do 1, 2, 3, 5 and say add, it's really, whoops, let's clear that out. 1, 2, 3, 6. Add is 1236. So it moved the decimal point over 2 because I've got this in the A position. Let's switch that back to 2. Coming over here, this one has that, the one I just talked about, the decimal numbers. This has a plus instead of the A. This also has a rounding mode for whether to round the numbers up, down, or off, meaning off means if the number following the last one that's displayed is 5 or greater, then it will round the last displayed number up. If it's 4 or less, it'll round the last displayed number down. The grand total switch says whether the grand total is on or off. On this one, it has a rate switch that's used for setting rates like the tax rate. I think that's also used for setting the date and time. This one has the decimal and the rounding combined. This has add 2 for the mode that puts the decimal point 2 over to the left from what you've actually typed. And the other switch is both on, off, and whether to do item counts. This one can actually do currency conversions. That's what that other one is there for. Monroe is pretty much the same. On this side, you've got display. N is for item count, print and display, and time is for doing time calculations. Okay, last but not least is the lowly paper feed button. That just simply pushes the paper up. All of them have it, and they'll move the paper up for you. Well, that's it. That's the conclusion of what all of these printing calculators have in common. I'm going to come back down here to the Sharp. This is, I think, the simplest of them. The Sharp and the Canon are both pretty straightforward. And what I've covered covers almost everything on this. The only thing left, I think, is the average key. It will compute an average if you want. My next video is going to concentrate on the differences between the models instead of what they have in common. My hope is that that might help you decide which one of these to buy. There are good reasons and bad reasons to buy them, and they are sometimes kind of subtle. So that will be my little preview for the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.